picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
And now for something completely different.
Well, there you go. I've got the taken advantage of the quarantine time to take care of some stuff around the house, and one of them was getting the Nautilus back up on its shelf. And there's the yellow submarine right in front of it with Spidey, and I've got the Green Goblin behind it. I might have room to put one other tall standing kit behind the Nautilus, but remote is in my hand. I am a good 16 feet away, and there you go. I can turn on the lights and turn the propeller. Now the only thing you're not really seeing is, well, you're not seeing anything because it's not on camera. The only thing you're not really seeing are the green lights in the cockpit or in the wheelhouse, and I think that is a function of the angle and how far away we are from it. So maybe that'll show up better once it gets darker. Also took the advantage of the time to run power to the one-man pod that had been sitting up there but had no power. Yes, I ended up running a power line all the way up there. Actually, it plugs in behind the Cylon there, and then the regular cord runs along the length of that shelf and then down in the corner so you don't see it. But at least I don't have to worry about the battery draining up there or trying to get to that kill switch. But I can turn it off and on from across the room, and that's all I was really aiming for. So another one of the tiny nagging things I needed to take care of has been taken care of. Welcome back, YouTubers. It's the last waning days of March, and it is, you know, the thing about March coming in like a lion or going out like a lamb, that whole thing. Apparently it came in with the sniffles and it went out with the full-blown virus. So we're going to stay in. We're going to work at home. I am on a work-at-home regimen right now, and that brings up an important point. I've joked about it, and people in the modeling business have often joked about, you know what, this is no punishment for us because we are solitary people anyway. It's like everybody's kind of catching up to my lifestyle since I retired. I stay at home and build models all day, and or all week long, and it's, you know, it's a nice joke. But here's the thing I learned, and I'll pass this along free of charge. If you are stuck at home, if you are going to be home for a long time, if you have been at home for a while, here are some important pearls of wisdom that I will pass on that I've learned going from the workaday world to the retired world and finding myself a man of leisure. It is important to keep your routines. And that means if you used to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning to get to work, get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, even if you're staying home. Yes, now the first weeks that I was retired, I'll say that maybe that first month, I was, yeah, you know what, I could stay up all night. I think I'm going to stay up all night. Well, that gets old pretty fast. And the older you get, the faster that gets old. Yeah, you can sleep in every morning, and I do find myself sleeping in every morning a lot longer than I used to when I had to get up, get to work and, you know, be productive early in the morning. So that schedule is going to change necessarily. But here's what I say to you. Your routines are important. Your routines are important, particularly if you have children in the house and you have pets in the house. I mean, because your dog is wondering why you're home all day. Your kids, if they're not in school or if they're being held out and you're homeschooling them or they have to do their classes online, they need to see you're living your consistent life. So if you used to go to bed at 10 or 11, go to bed at 10 or 11. If you used to have dinner at 6 or 7, have dinner at 6 or 7. It's these things that will help you. Your consistent routines need to be maintained. But now is the time. You've got, if you're, yes, you're working from home, but you're not commuting, so you've got extra time here and there. Maybe that shower in the morning is a couple minutes longer. Hey, indulge. You need to be clean anyway. But it's important that over the long haul you keep to your routines. Again, it's going to make it easier for when all this mess is over and you got to get your butt back to work. It's going to make it a lot easier for you to do that if you are maintaining some sense of a schedule. But like I said, now is the time. If you've got a model in the stash, if you've got, you know, a model up in the attic you haven't touched in years, now is the time. You know, you don't want to retile the bathroom. Maybe you don't want to repaint the house. But you could go out and trim those bushes that have been needing it, or you could go out and clean the gutters that have been needing it. You gotta stay active. Don't sit on the couch. Don't fall into the trap of, you know, just watching the tube and getting every piece of bad news that's coming. You don't want to turn into that. Watch your local news, because that's the important thing. They'll know whether your park is closed. They'll know which grocery store locally is out of milk, bread, or toilet paper, whatever. The national news will give you a big picture, and you know, watch the news that you don't always agree with. You need to see all the sides, but don't dwell on it. Don't sit there and fret and worry, because you know your kids and your pets pick up on that. So don't do it. But now's the time. If you've got a model, teach your kid to build a model. That's a great way to spend some time. Anyway, enough of the soapbox. Let's get back to what we're working on. This is a Hasegawa kit. Now, I've never worked on a Hasegawa kit. Japanese. I could tell by all of the Japanese characters on it. But this is an odd duck. This is what I was at the hobby shop the other day, stocking up because you never know. And the guy who runs the model shop said, I've got a kit that, you know, that's got you written all over it. Well, I looked all over this box. I couldn't see my name anywhere. But it is a weird duck, and we're going to explore it together. It's got a ton of parts, which I love. It looks to be a transformer of sorts. You can build several different versions out of this kit, and it is designed, from what I can tell on the instructions, for you to be able to take it apart and reassemble it in various different formations, which is going to make it near impossible to light, because if you have to take things apart and refigure them, then you're not going to be able to have a consistent wiring harness through the whole thing. So I have to decide whether I want to pick one design and make that permanent, whether I want to go with the different versions. Let me show you the sheet here. This is a color sheet that shows you all of the different variations that you can make out of this kit. It is a shuttle, a space shuttle with a crawler. You know, it's like you know, the old rockets, the old Saturn V rockets. They sat on a platform that had tank treads on it, and it crawled. Well, it's got it's a shuttle with a transport like that, or it's a hopper, which we've kind of seen with thrusters underneath that. You know, it's like a one-man ship that goes from bit to bit. It does a weird thing where it changes scale, because it is a certain scale when it is the hopper, and it's another scale when it's used as the shuttle. So that's odd. It is Operation Omega, if I know my Greek. That is an Omega there. And it's got, you know, great and plentiful instructions, lots of constructing to do. And it looks like it's going to be some fun. So let's enough of this blathering. Let's get down to the table. Okay, I've scrolled out, zoomed out as far as I can, but this is the work table with all of the parts needed. And as you can tell, there are a lot of parts. And I've unbagged everything and brought it out, with the exception of the clear parts bag. And you'll notice it's got springs and screws and everything else in it that you will need. And this intrigued me probably more than the rest of it. All these tiny springs. But as you can tell, some readily recognizable shuttle parts, as well as some tank treads. And here's what I was talking about earlier as far as scale. Here is the pilot for the hopper version, and I am looking carefully to see the pilots for the shuttle version. Well, here's the cockpit for the shuttle version, and I know they're in here somewhere. Of course, you see engine housings. These are your typical big shuttle engines. And I am vamping now because I thought I had them all. Oh, here they are. That's how different they are. Here is the big pilot, and right over here are all of the tiny pilots. So that it changes in scale from here to here depending on what version of this you use. So this is not a single scale endeavor. I won't say. Well, I was trying to use a shuttle name. It's an endeavor. Actually, you have decals for Atlantis and Discovery, or I'm sorry, you also have Challenger. That may not have been the best choice, but I think I'll make it the Atlantis if I'm going to make it a shuttle. But interesting. The Japanese translations are always fun to read, particularly any misspellings and things like that. But we'll see what all we need. Oh, it says open a window from time to time. That's always nice. Never use glue or paint near fire. Open a window from time to time. Learn correct usage of tools. Keep all materials and tools neatly. Well, we'll do 3 of these. 3 out of 4 ain't bad. And here you go. You can see these are the painting guides and sticker guides. This does have stickers. I don't particularly care for that idea. I'd rather at least have water slide decals. So we're going to see how well those actually get used, because stickers inevitably get dirty. And when they get dirty, they show the edge of the sticker, and it doesn't show as the same color as the rest of your kit. Plus, it sticks up like a sore thumb. But these look to be pretty smooth, so we're going to see how well they will work. And I'm not wild about the black outlines around things. Don't know if I'm going to have to trim those off or not. Like I said, I don't know which version of this I'm going to do. I may stick. I like what intrigued me was this hopper, so I may just build the hopper version of it and eschew the shuttle parts completely. But there's the pilot in the hopper without the canopy on. This is the crawler for the shuttle. If you're going to use the shuttle and crawler version, there's the back view of the shuttle and crawler. That's the back view of the hopper. That's the 3/4 view of the hopper with canopy on. Yeah, I kind of like that. I kind of like that hopper version, only because, if you want to buy a shuttle model, there are probably better and more accurate shuttle models. If that's the itch you want to scratch, go get a shuttle. And lots of fine manufacturers make really good shuttle kits if that's what you're trying to accomplish. So I think I'll make the hopper version of this. Okay, looking at the instructions on this, it looks like there's 2 parallel tracks here. One for the shuttle and one for the carrier. I kind of thought that they would be doing one and then the other. But apparently you follow the top track if you're doing the shuttle and the bottom track if you are doing the carrier. And then at the very end, they tell you how to take the parts that you've got made and turn them into, see, here's all the completed shuttle and carrier. And then they show you, it worked in rehearsal, I swear. And then how to turn all of that into the hopper. So I guess I'm going to have to follow the orders in which they were going. I wanted to do just the hopper, but there's no instructions for that particular track. So let's go back and start at the beginning. I'm going to, I guess, follow the shuttle the whole way through and then come down and do the carrier all the way through. Okay, back up, start again. I was going to build shuttle all the way through, then come back and build carrier all the way through. It does seem to make some sense logically to build both chunks simultaneously and just build page by page. because then you don't find yourself looking back and forward over the same thing. And also it helps in the way that the parts are laid out to do that. So starting to put together the hopper cockpit, or the main cockpit. I don't know how much of this I'm going to do before I go back in and prime. This paint, this plastic definitely will need to be primed before it is final coated. But I want to do at least some sub-assemblies before I prime them. Well, welcome back, YouTubers. It's Tuesday, and I am continuing work on this shuttle slash carrier slash whatever it's going to end up being. And I did learn one thing yesterday, and if you can learn one thing a day, you're doing better than me. I needed to go out and prime this whole thing. I kind of resisted that. I was just starting to put the white pieces together, and then I realized, you know, if I'm not careful, I'm going to end up getting something built so that I can't take apart to paint. And what really set it off was when I was working on this part yesterday. Now, this part has what, in a sense, are fender wells. I guess the landing gear kind of go in here, and it pivots back and forth. But I realized I was getting into something that, if I'm not careful, I would never be able to get paint in there, and it would look ugly. And especially if it's like and I don't even know really what part this is going to end up being. But if it's like a fender well or a landing gear bay or something like that, I really should be painting inside of there in case I can't get to it later. And if I spray it gray, at least I know it's got that going for it. I started putting the cockpit together, and I realized I was getting, you know, really far into this, and wouldn't be able to put a coat of paint on it and get it to stick unless I put some primer on it. So I ended up taking all the things out, even the stuff I know is going to be white, like the nose of the shuttle and all that. Took it outside this morning, took the trees out, and just gave them a good old spritz. And particularly, I mean, not necessarily on the outsides of parts, because I figured I could do that later if I needed to, but on the insides of parts, because I don't know what's going to end up showing, and I don't know what's going to end up needing paint that I can't get to. And that was what was spurring all of this activity. And I also noticed when I was building this yesterday that this kit has a fondness for doing plate or pieces or panels that have a slight texture to them. Let's see if I can point this out. Like there's a grill texture in here, and much easier to go ahead and get a primer coat on that before I put it in place. And I noticed that, again, some of these have this texture on them too, and it'd be better off to go ahead and prime those before I get too far into the building. It's just, I don't know whether it is a failing of age or whether it is a habit, but I have a much easier time building a model kit if I start off gray. I don't know what it was. I'm just picky that way. The Yellow Submarine I painted gray before I could really work on it. The X-Wing from last week was light gray, and I needed to make it a little bit darker so that I could see what was going on. And this thing, I figured I'd go ahead and start building it white with the white plastic, and then prime it after I had sub-assemblies. And I realized I would just have an easier time if I went ahead and started painting it gray. So I have been poisoned, I guess, by the gray plastic builders of America, or the gray model manufacturers, or whatever. I've been brainwashed into the fact that I must be starting with gray plastic. But I think it's going to help me in the long run, because like I said, there are going to be places, nooks and crannies, that I won't be able to get back into after the assembly is underway, that I'm better off just painting gray now. So let's continue with that. We've got these landing gear type of assemblages, and I need to, since these pieces here, and they have a pivot on them, so I need to pull these apart and maybe get some primer on them before I glue those in place. This is the type of thing that I was referring to as far as accessibility is never going to be any better than when the parts are laid out in front of you on the trees. So that's the best time to, oh, come on, there you go. That's the best time to go ahead and give them a good priming. Back again, there are two things that I wanted to bring up at this point. There are some parts here that are nothing but movable joints for other two parts, like pivots and internal structure type of things, and I have to make sure that I don't put too much paint on those, because I don't know what the tolerances are for those, as far as am I gumming up the works by putting paint on those. So I have to keep those in mind. I might need to sand the paint back off of those. And the other thing is, I noticed, and this happened to me a couple times yesterday, you'd figure after the first time it happened I would wise up and not do it again, but if I only learned stuff after the second time I made a mistake, that would be a grand improvement. But the way this kit is designed, I have to be careful when you're snipping it off of the runners here, because it looked like a couple of times they had actually the attachment pin where you're putting the pin into the hole. And I'll give you the best example was on this cockpit piece, that the pin was part of the runner. That's where where it was joined to the runner. And if you've run into that problem before, if you accidentally snip too far into, because I'm used to from most other kits going right up against the side of the piece and doing my snip there. But if I should have left a bit of it on the part, you can actually find yourself cleaning off a piece of the part. You go through and you sand that like that, and then you realize, oh, I've just sanded away the pin that I need to use to attach that to the rest of the model. So being familiar with the parts will help against that. But also, hey, you know what, if you designed this kit a little bit better, you wouldn't have that, or the average modeler wouldn't have that problem. Engine bells are always fun because you always have this ugly seam, and then you have to sand it, and then you have to reestablish all of the lines on the engine bell. And this one is no different in that respect. However, I am noticing that the raised ridges, or the raised detail on the engine bells, are oh so big and exaggerated, which makes them actually easier. You don't have to worry about accidentally sanding off too much of the detail. Okay, continuing work with the shuttle, and this is how the wings will move or transform. And it kind of underscores what I was saying earlier about not knowing what parts are visible until you put things together. But basically the mechanism lets you slide the wing out, and then you push it forward like that. Well, that exposes all of these areas here that now I know I need to paint, that I didn't know how much of that would be showing before. But I kind of like this mechanism. It's really beefy and really well thought out. Of course, the other one does the same thing, but those are a couple of good joints there. And it locks back in very securely. Although that's weird, because they don't seem to have recognized the fact that all of the shuttles in the fleet have the black tiles on the bottom. They've taken the design aspect of it, but none of the they haven't taken into account the fact that so much of this would be black. I noticed in the painting, or in the painted up version, they didn't do any black on the bottom, which would mean that a lot of this area now would be black. So interesting. We're just going to have to see what kind of an animal this creates when we're all done. I just want to give you a small sampling of the type of options you have with this kit. This, for example, this module here looks like it could have If you slide this side up, it is built for a track, and this is the part of the carrier for the shuttle. Those are the treads for it. But it's got a head on it that you unscrew and take off. So once you do that, you can flip this over like that, and it becomes another type of module, and then you screw this head back on it. So obviously there are things you can glue together, things you shouldn't glue together because you've got screw attachments. But this gets back to what I was talking about this morning about not knowing exactly which sides needed painting. Well, in this instance, all sides need painting because it's meant to be flipped over and used both ways. So if I want to keep the mobility, all puns intended, then I want to keep the tracks out. So this is going to be a little bit more interesting of a build than I was believing at the very beginning, because now I've got to do more painting than I had originally intended. And right now I need to find a wee Phillips screwdriver so that I can screw this bit back in. It's interesting. I've seen models where you are building a transformer, something that is it's got joints in it, is posable and all that, but nothing that's meant to be actually unscrewed, unbolted, taken apart, and reassembled. That makes it quite interesting. It is gonna it's gonna be interesting to see how it's gonna be painted. I can't a paint scheme that might work for one formation might not work for another formation, so it's going to be interesting to try these things out. Okay, I think I'm going to wrap up for today and do some cleanup here. I've got these modules worked out. These are the ones that have the tracks on one side, and then you unscrew the back, flip it over, and it's a flat panel. And I'm noticing the same is happening here. This looks to be, well, we've got a antenna that moves around and can be repositioned, and it looks like this panel here is meant to rotate because the plug on the end rotates, and I believe it goes in something like this so as to make it look like a panel that flips around. So this is going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. I'm glad that I did get the primer on this, because some of these places would be darn difficult to get into now, to at least get a gray pass on them. Even if I don't put any other detail paints on them, at least I got a gray, and it's not going to be the white plastic that it was. These such panels, these are the tracks that you pull out. I've got them screwed in now simply because it's also helping the glue to dry on the bolt that's behind it, but also I won't lose the screws and bolts that way. But this goes something like, let me see, this goes something like this as the crawler for the shuttle, and then there's another cockpit that goes out in front here, but then this sits up something like, it's going to be fun. It's weird. I'm glad I picked it, because it definitely is not like anything exactly like anything I've built before. So we're having fun now. Welcome back. It is Wednesday, midway through the week, and work continues on this shuttle slash carrier slash hopper thingery. And I got an order in from Steve yesterday, so I'm going to have to hop off and split my time off putting orders together for he and for Paul, and then between that and building this, I think I've decided I was going to spend this week building and next week painting. I think that's a good division of labor, but that also means I have to hop on the plotter and make some noise, so I won't be able to run the camera very much today. Let's see where we are to get caught up. Working on, well, you saw the wings yesterday, and I'm getting dangerously to the point where there's some construction or some painting I'm going to have to do. like all of these cockpits, because they get buried in and glued in behind other pieces. And anything exterior I can wait till next week to paint, but I think I might be stuck at least on the shuttle cockpit of not shuttlecock, that's badminton, the shuttle cockpit, getting this in, or getting it painted and stuck back in before I can glue like the bottom of the body together and things like that. So that's, I'm evaluating what parts I have to paint now and what parts I can wait till next week. And that's pretty much where I'm at on this. I also am starting to work on this back assembly here, and of course you see all 3 engines, and I've been putting they did a pretty neat thing as far as how they're embedding their bolts. You can see, where is it? Where did it go? Here it is. Like in this piece, you've got to actually have bolts in behind there, and then you have a little plug that goes over top of it, which gives you the screw holes here that you need to attach the thrusters. But I've got plenty of other little greebly stuff here. I've got landing gear. I've got carrier stuff. I mean, I've got enough stuff to do to get the building done this week. So we're back to that today, and like I said, we'll be pulling apart whatever we can or whatever we need to next week to paint. But I'm getting to the fun part now. There's a huge gun here that needs to be built that goes in this launch, or goes in the cargo module of the shuttle, and the doors need to go on next. I think that'll be the next big fun thing to do. So without much further ado, let's get on with it. You saw me build these things yesterday, and maybe I didn't show this bit, but the back panel screws on, and then the these back panels screw on, and then the bottom, come on, it's a long screw here, pippy long screw, but then this slides out, and then you can either use it this way or this way depending on what use you're going with. But you're also required to unscrew to make these modules side by side, or I'm sorry, lengthwise. They go like this, and you have to screw them together to make one longer version for the crawler. That's when you're using the crawler, that's how they're used. So I still have not quite decided whether I'm going to make this as the crawler when it's all done, or whether I'm going to make it as the hopper. I kind of prefer the hopper, but we're going to see as we finish which is the most attractive. I still think that because the hopper's more unusual looking, the shuttle is a shuttle. I mean, we've seen that 100 times. So it's a question of, I think I'm going to make the hopper because it's the more unusual vehicle. I'm just pulling this apart because what I want to do this morning is clean up, like throw away empty sprue and all that. So if I can like do this and this and this, I can basically get rid of the areas of the sprue that I don't need anymore, and that just makes the whole work surface that much easier to deal with. The only problem with this, sometimes you'll end up cutting off the letter, or the letter of the sprue, so you have to guess which sprue that came off of. But things like that, that way I'm just not, like this section here, I go ahead and cut that apart and leave that. I've got one piece here which is an obvious tail piece, but I can cut it off with the number, and these are rather obvious. I don't need to have the sprue for that. But that's just part of the cleanup process I go through in the morning to kind of, and then I before I throw it out, I doubly check to make sure I haven't left some tiny piece on the sprue, because I have done that before. This one still has enough all over that I need to keep it, but I have done that before where I've tossed things that had one part left on them. So I've gotten more careful at the same time, but I do like boiling things down to the exact pieces that I need. Well, that was a close one, yes. Reading instructions, like I said. I see the little thing after I'm doing all of this that says, warning, do not cement. So that's why this didn't fit very well or didn't have a lot of mating surfaces, because it was not meant to be glued. That explains why the screws are there. So do not cement that. So yes, I can be taught. It's not easy, it's not pretty, but I can be taught. Well, that's weird. There's a retaining ring here that's meant to go on the bottom of this piece, but the retaining ring is the same exact size as the hole, so therefore it does not retain, because it does not keep this part from, which is what you would imagine it does. It's meant to keep it from going through the hole, but it don't do that. So I may leave that piece for later, just to see if I don't get some additional instruction on that later on. So now let's build the big gun, the big one. The big gun looks like a lot of fun. Let's build that, and it's something that exists as its own entity, and I don't have to attach it to anything else at this point. So let me find, there you go. I could build it, paint it, and then decide to glue it to its place in the cargo hold at a later date. So let me get the parts out that I need for it. Okay, there's that one. There is, this is a part that I need. Thought so. There's that one. Let's see. Is that, well, it looks like the gun halves are here and here. Okay, so both sides of that gun can be glued together. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. It's a bit of a mixture. Sometimes I will put the glue all over the side of one part and then glue the other half to it. But sometimes if you do that with this MEK, it runs the risk of drying before you get to the other half. And then sometimes I put the pieces together and then run the little bit of MEK down the seam and let it do the capillary action and pull itself together. It just matters. It differs sometimes on how complicated the part is, how many little dips and angles there are on it, how many pins are in it. These guys have pins, but I don't know if it's true with all Hasegawa kits, but the pins on these are very delicate and small. They're not, I mean, they're there, they do their job just barely as far as, you know, locating things together, but they don't lock together very well. Again, not like some Bandai's or even some of the round 2 kits or the Mobius kits, as far as doing real good jobs of locking, and they are few and far between. They're not as numerous as your typical kit as far as, you know, pins per inch of a seam. There you go. Okay, so we're holding the barrel together like that. What else do we need? We need the 2-side gun. Well, I'll continue this and then we'll show you the progress later. Okay, I want to start today with a big old fat I told you so. This is a scan of the decals that a friend of mine named Dirk had sent me. Saw that I had some trouble with the Yellow Submarine. These are the decals I remember. I remember when I built this thing years ago, I remembered getting the decals, specifically the decals with the 4 beetles in it. And then you had your choice. You had the perfectly well-designed, well-rounded portholes. Then you have these sloppily drawn portholes. These were the nose decals. the very nicely drawn sunburst, and then the perfectly thick and universally designed stripes. This is the decal strip set I remember as a kid, and it only reinforces my opinion again of how cheap the new decal sets are. So what I think I'm going to do is just keep this in my memory, though. I will scan it and see if I can improve my masks using this line. But mine came out not too different from that. Okay, we are back on the tabletop looking at the Operation Omega Hasegawa shuttle slash hopper slash carrier thing. And when all is said and done, this builds up to a fairly credible looking shuttle. This shuttle is fairly well proportioned, fairly well done, and of course it's got all of these panels and transforming things about it. I still haven't gotten the bottom of it glued on because I have cockpit details to worry about. And there are three cockpits on this design. One for the shuttle, one for the troop carrier, or the crawler right here. Oops, get it back to where. One for the crawler right here, and then of course the one that is wildly out of scale with everything else when you flip the whole thing over and make the hopper out of it. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going through and I am shoring up some bits of construction and painting gray over some areas and sanding some areas. I still would like to wait and do the painting on this thing next week. Just call it, because there's some sanding, there's some seaming and sanding that I need to do, and I don't want to try to rush it through in order to get it done and painted today and tomorrow, since this is Thursday, by the way, and we only have, it's the gateway to the weekend. But then again, isn't every day a weekend day now that everybody is required to stay at home? I actually did venture out and did a little bit of grocery shopping this morning, and it, not so much for me, but I was out of birdseed and squirrel food. So, you know, it's cheap entertainment, and if you're stuck at home and you got nothing to do but watch the birds and feed the squirrels, then by gum, you need to have the supplies to do that. So what I'm going to do is the last bits. Now, I'm very hesitant to start involving these canopy pieces, these clear pieces, because we've got these canopies that need to be reused, but I don't want to scratch them, don't want to get paint on them. And I did stumble across something on the instructions yesterday that I wanted to point out, because I think this is what happens when you are starting to translate from Japanese into English. But here's the thing, and I'll point this out. It deals with these shuttle doors, and I'll I'll let you look at that for a while and see if you can spot what might be the problem. I'm not going to let it go too long, but I'm going to say right here, it says apply cement, and it talks about this piece right here. Cement this down to the body of the shuttle. Apply cement. Do not apply cement here. Do not cement. Now, I understand this back here says do not cement, and that they're talking about the big fin up the back, the big stabilizer. But this is pointing to this piece. This is pointing to this piece. This is pointing to this piece. And I've got the average says apply cement, do not apply cement. So there you go. I guess you could pick it whichever way you want to do it. C34, either you apply cement or you do not cement. Then it says down here, apply C34 to a fuselage. Be careful not to apply cement to payload bay door. I think what they're saying, what they're trying to say is apply the cement on this side and this side, but not here. I mean, that's as much as I can get. You don't cement the front and back, but you cement the sides, because these pieces here, obviously, well, this door opens, but I want to tell you, because it's worth playing with a little bit. This is the thing that's got the gun behind it. It opens all of this tall, all of that much, and then you spin the gun around. It barely clears the door, but that's the height of the gun. So I get what you're saying, but they could have been a little more clear. Apply cement to the sides, but not to the front and back. And actually, you could apply the cement. You could glue it. I'm not going to apply cement. You could glue it here around that edge. Just don't get any glue on the opening doors. That's all they need to say. Hey, dummies, don't put the glue where the doors are. And then this piece, which picks up and spins, that doesn't get any glue. I mean, this doesn't get any glue on it. Let's go ahead and take this piece out and then pull this up. Let's see, we pull this piece out, and then this is happening because this out of scale cockpit is not glued in yet. But if we pull this up, because it's supposed to pull up, actually there's supposed to be a little ring that keeps it from coming all the way out, and then it goes back in like that. Oh, okay. Okay, I've been playing with this off and on all day, not taking too much time on it, but wanted to go ahead and put some black paint on just to show what a shuttle should look like. The instructions and the photos all had the whole thing white, and that's probably really going to interfere with how it looks when it's transformed. But I wanted to get, I've got the cockpit in finally, and I put a couple of the stickers in. I hate these stickers. You have to actually cut them out from the sheet. You have to cut the little squares out. They're not even pre-scored. So I doubt I'm going to be using too many of these, because I just can't help but think how ugly they're going to be when they go to sit on top of paint. So we probably won't use a lot of those. I'm using the cockpit ones, the instrument panels, things like that. Since those will be inside, I can kind of get away with that. But having finished this cockpit, I was able to do this, glue on this one last piece, which is this long piece here, and I've got tape over the seams, as you can tell. I'm gonna let this dry. It's the end of the evening. I've started touching some little details in here just to see how well those are going to work, but I'm going to save the bulk of the painting. We might get this done tomorrow. I don't know. I want to see what kind of whimsy strikes my mood tomorrow, and I get up and look at this thing and start thinking about the serious paint jobs on it. I've been going in and doing some preliminary stuff and weathering and rusting and things like that, but putting the white on the hull of the shuttle is going to be a big deal, and then we're going to see how well that meshes with everything else. Good morning, kids. It's Friday. You know what that means. It's the last work day of the week, and by all rights, it's going to be the last work day on this kit. Let me tell you a tale of woe, and I've got a tale of woe is me. The good people at Hasegawa, when they made this kit, I bet you they thought to themselves, let's make a transforming kit. We're not going to learn how to make one. We're just going to make one. We're not going to learn, what stresses plastic can be under, how far you could twist something. We're just going to shoot in the dark and see what we come up with. And that's what it looks like they've done here. I have taken this thing apart and reconstructed it so many times I can probably field strip it in my sleep, like they do with rifles in the movies. And that is because, and I've had to go back, started with the 10X glue, and it seems to be fine, but any piece that is under stress, I have to go back and re-glue with super glue. And I don't like using super glue because it's like a stormtrooper rifle. It's a clumsy thing to use. I only like using it on resin. I don't like using it on plastic because particularly the thin stuff runs all over, gets in your fingers. It's just a mess. But every piece like this one that is under some sort of stress, I had to pull out and re-glue together with super glue. They have got this interlocked in such a way that to make, like this piece for example, has to flip like this at some point. It has to go like that. Well, they've got a pivot joint right here, but what they don't tell you is that you cannot simply swing this out and turn it. You have to push it, you have to pull it out and turn it, or push it and turn it, and then lock it into position. And you can't do it one way or the other. It can only go clockwise, which is just clumsy and bad, and like I'm supposed to remember that in 20 years. So that it, you know, overlocks. It's needlessly over-engineered. And what that causes is a joint here that's going to break. Well, when that joint breaks, you got to pull the whole bloody ship apart to fix it, which is where I'm at right now. So, and I think I have discovered the real reason why all of the photos of this show it in, you know, white with minimal paint on it. And because it was done in white plastic. Because every time you touch it, every time you transform it, every time you twist it around, you're going to scratch the paint, which is no bueno. So here I am. I'm thinking, do I need to just build this as a single version and be done with it, or do I want to try to maintain any of the transforming features of it? As this is, it's not a bad little shuttle model. And the one part that I have managed to salvage and make work, watch it not work because the camera's on. You have to push in a secret little place here, and then there you go. Offer up a sacrificed chicken and a pint of blood to get it to work. Is this thing right here, okay? The gun comes up out of the bay only fractionally, just wide enough for it to pivot around. If you want to spin it back down, push it back down into the bay, and the doors will close up over it. That part works. That's not too shabby. These wings here will work, which is to push them out, and then you pull them out a little bit, and then they twist down into a different position. They move forward. That works well too. That also works well. Although you're supposed to, at the same time, you're supposed to pop these panels out and then swap them into the other wing to make those work, which is, as a feature, just is, you know, a dumb feature. So we got that much working. We're happy with this much. This is the piece, like I said, that goes along the bottom. And I've painted it black to show how the heat panels should work. And if it's important enough, it's held in place with a long metal screw. But when you want to pull this up, the joint for it sits up here, and then you do this and twist it. It's just, ugh. Anyway, so my goal today is to get this back into somewhat of a shape, get the make a decision whether or not I'm going to actually make it a transformable thing, or whether I'm just going to make the best version of it and leave it that way. The plastic itself is not substantial enough to hold up to the stressing and twisting that you have to do without breaking somewhere else down the line. It's not engineered with enough fine tolerances to allow you to easily move things back and forth. The plastic itself is kind of clunky. The joint plastic is kind of clunky. The substantial parts that you need to hold on to aren't substantial enough to take any of the actual weight and stress of twisting. It's not good enough to be one of anything. It's kind of like it hits several notes, but none of them clear enough to be a good. It's not a good enough model to be a model. It's not a good enough toy to be a toy. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. So, like I said, today is the last day I'm going to work on this. It's either going to get done or it's not, but I'm not spending too much more time on this. So let's see how much we can get put together today and what kind of result we'll get at the end of it. Join me, won't you? It will be a discovery for both of us. Although I am, and it's a bit of a challenger too. But I am making this the Atlantis for all that means, because it may end up at the bottom of a deep, deep body of water. Okay, the reconstruction continues. I want to show you the stupidest single thing I think I've ever seen on a model. And I'll let you be the judge of it, whether it is in fact the stupidest thing, but I think it's right up there, is gluing two clear pieces together. There is a clear bulkhead here that needs to go inside the clear dome. And it's really stupid, because no matter how you join that, you're going to get a big old fat glue line on there. So I'm going to end up painting something over that to camouflage that glue line, because you're going to see it on the outside, and I don't care what kind of glue you use, you're still going to see that. So I've got to come up with a way to paint a pinstripe or something over top of that to camouflage that glue line that is stupid. See, the stupid glue line. Learn from the stupid glue line. Don't ever do that in your models. If you're out there and you're designing models, don't ever do that. Don't ask your customer, your client, your person who is using your product to make that kind of a stupid joint. Don't do it. Got the big cockpit, the one that's overscale. That is sitting in place now, and I've been able to go in and touch the paint. The sticker decals that work for some of these other cockpits. There are 3 cockpits on this kit. Whether you could see them in behind the stupid joint, but you can see there's a cockpit decal right in there. Those are kind of acceptable. Not my first choice, but because they're behind frosted plastic, you don't see them all that well. This one, you don't get quite that luxury with, because it's not only a change in scale, but it's right up in your face. And if you flip this piece around like it's supposed to be, and you screw it back down, and then it pops off the joint like that. It was my fault I didn't have it glued down. But if you flip this rotisserie rack around and you screw it back down, then this with the stupid joint, this canopy, is reused right here. And it doesn't lose any of its stupidity when it's used that way. But you've got that, and then you've got this wraparound, which you cannot glue. Well, you have to glue it in place this way around the bottom, but you cannot glue along the top, because this, like I say, this canopy has to do double duty like that. And then you get something. This is your hopper cockpit. Actually, it's upside down. It has to do this to join. Well, no, it can't do that. It has to go in this way. But then does it match up the... No, the other cockpit overlaps it. So yeah, no wonder the astronaut has to be in his spacesuit all the time, because this cockpit is always open to space. It is not a pressurized cockpit. The design choices in this thing continue to astound. This is what, and actually by the time you get all done, you're supposed to do that as the front landing gear. So if you put this thing together as the hopper, it becomes a rather unwieldy looking beast. Let me see if I can put the pieces together as the hopper and kind of show you how it looks. Okay, I think this may be the first time that I've got the hopper constructed. Taken both of the shuttle and the crawler, and I've done all of the transforming to it, moved things around, taken out screws, replaced screws all of that fun stuff. And this is what you get for the hopper, and by gum and by golly, I like it. I think this is the version that I am going to, and of course you can pop open the bay. That is the one thing I have not done yet. You can pop open the bay. I've got tape covering it, that's why it's not popping open. And drop the gun down. There you go. And of course you can shoot off your own landing gear that way. But it's got the belly gun. Alrighty, I've just put on a yet seemingly endless another round of black paint. And I've gone over and I've re-blacked the shuttle, and I have pre-shaded the areas, and I've re-blacked the bottom of it. And I'm going to let this dry good and long before I put some tape on it and try to bring up some of the whites and the ivory colors that are in the shuttle. I have yet to decide exactly what final color, what finish color I'm going to use for these parts, because I can see that I might want to make them all a unified colors to look like they belong together. I'm still playing a bit with these landing gears. I think I am going to keep it as the hopper, but I want you to be able to see the shuttle kind of underneath it all. Alrighty, I'm going through and putting down some, not white, but very, very, very light gray. Yeah, aspirationally you'd think the shuttle was white, but and a lot of the material on it, the cloth, was actually into the not beige, but the warm whites. But you know, realistically, it's not white, you know, bone china porcelain white. It's a little bit darker. So that's all I'm doing here is just putting in some great swaths of it, and I'll probably go in with the black and paint the detail back in. There are some big stripes, obviously, like on the leading edge of the tail here, or the fin, that I need to repaint in black. But there is some stuff that we're like right up front here where it starts to get really irregular around certain panels. I can paint those black in by hand. So that's the kind of stuff I'm doing now, and letting it sit and then coming back and then doing another pass of the gray over top of it. It's not something you can get all in one go, because if you try to put too much of it on, it will pool up and be ugly and you know, break your toys and make you cry. So you know, you go over, you do a pass, you come back, you let that soak in, you come back, you do another pass. And this is just the tail piece that is not needed if you don't use the whole shuttle. You don't need that piece, but what the heck, I'll go ahead and paint it. And I think the last thing I want to do now is dip out of the brush here and paint the astronaut. Let's see. I give him some zots in. Because the cockpit is so dark, I want to go with a lighter astronaut suit. Usually that's a good opportunity to use some color, to introduce some color into what could be a very drab setting. And I may just put some the slightest bit of an accent coloring here, just paint a few little details. But it looks like there's maybe a strap or two that I could paint on there that would provide me a good good mixture, or a good contrast. That's what I'm looking for. That's the word I'm trying to use. A good contrast to the rest of the cockpit. Okay, I don't mind telling you, I've had my doubts about this project as it has progressed, but I think it's coming along quite nicely. I'm just doing a little bit of the black and white back and forthing on the shuttle. Kind of reminds me of back when I was painting the Interstellar Ranger, which only makes sense since it was designed after the shuttle and shares a lot of the same characteristics. But I'm just going back and forth and hitting the white, then going back and hitting the black. I think this is turning out quite nicely now. I've gone through and I've touched up like some of the detail painting right in there that, you know, would have taken forever to cut a mask for, when I could just cut that by hand, or paint that by hand, sorry. Got the flaps painted, and here of course you can see the upside down cockpit with this piece that would go in. So yeah, there we go. Lay that in place. I'm trying hard not to get fingerprints all over the gray paint. Succeeding, you know, half on, half off. But now I'm ready for maybe the last coat of the gray, the whitish gray. Pondering whether or not I should hit this with any sort of clear primer to lock it in before I paint anything on top of it. That might keep me from smudging it, or make it a little bit more resilient for when I'm painting it. It's beautiful weather outside, a little bit cool if you're standing in the shade. But I think what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to take this opportunity to go out and just hit this very lightly with a flat coat. And that should, like I said, lock it in so that I can touch it a little bit more forcefully. Okay, I'm playing with the idea of using these stickers, and they are having the exact problem I predicted they would have. And that is because this is not die cut, you have to go in there and cut them out from the sheets, and they've made the lines artificially close to the decal. There's no reason on God's green earth why the cut lines on those decals should be so bloody close to the actual printing. That was mistake number one. And mistake number two is when you go to stick them down with any amount of ease, you get dirt lines all around them, because they are stickers. They are not decals. It traps dirt. It does not lay flat. There is no way to diminish the carrier film like you would with a regular decal. It's just amateurish and bad on a level that Hasegawa should know better. And I'm certainly not going to use the rest of these, because none of them are going to be any better. I was able to salvage some for the control panels on the inside, because they're not going to have that same contact with weathering that you do on the ones on the outside. Okay, after much hemming and hawing, I've decided this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to close up shop for today, for this week, on this, knowing that it's not finished. But I am not going to work a whole nother week on it next week. I will work Monday and Tuesday, and if I finish on Monday, then I'll put the last video up on Monday, and that will show the finish. I don't want to rush this, particularly dealing with white and black paint, because that's when you start smudging things, and you set yourself back, and you end up going one step forward, one step back, and it's just a waste of time and a frustration. So we're gonna call this done, not finished, and pick it up again next week. And so we have a wild and confusing end to a wild and confusing week. Maybe not wild, maybe I'm overstating that, but this kit turned out to be a little bit more, once I got into it, than I was thinking. It is turning out nicely. I mean, you do get a fairly credible shuttle out of this. I still have tape over there, that's why you don't see the windows. You do get a fairly credible shuttle kit out of this model. But like I said, if that's what you're in for, go buy a dedicated shuttle model. The gimmick on this kit, I don't think is worth the it's not worth it. It's a nice, I mean, I would have liked to have seen this lovely hopper design kit. Or I would like to have seen this shuttle with a serious shuttle and a crawling, carrier. Either of those things would have been great kits. I don't think the transforming gimmick is worth it. They could have given, if they had given up on that aspect of it, they could have made reinforced models of both, and they would have turned out better, and I think the design would have been more solid, and I think the results would have been happier for the modeler. I just don't think the transforming gimmick was worth what the result ended up being, or it has ended up being. I've said again, what I'm going to do is finish this up next week and then put out a micro report after it is finished, so you can see the whole thing done and you can get a fair assessment of it. So until very soon, when we will finish this, y'all be good, stay safe, wash your hands, don't go out of the house if you don't need to. Found out yesterday that Wonderfest has been pushed until October, which is fine for me because that just gives me more time to build. This is actually closer to Halloween, actually, which could lend itself to a whole nother type of model building. Until you see me again when I'm finishing this kit, be safe, be good to each other, try not to kill each other in quarantine, and we'll see you here very soon.